Good evening, students. Welcome to the session. Have you revised the TDS topic that we have discussed last time? Because we are now going to, today finish this particular topic. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. We'll start solving the questions on 194 DA as I had told you in the last class also. Good evening, Satish Kumar. Yes, any questions so far? Anyone has any questions? Let me just open up in that particular case the question on 194 DA. Let me just stop the screen share and share it again. Yeah. I hope all of you are able to see the screen. Yes? Okay. So examine the applicability of provisions of tax deduction at source under 194 DA. Mr. X, a resident, is due to receive. One second, I think there's some problem. Is screen visible? Good evening, Jenny. मुझे क्यों नहीं दिख रहा है? ब्लैंक नहीं दिख रहा है ना? व्हाइट पेज दिख रहा है ना? वही half lakhs on 30th June 2024 towards maturity proceeds of LIC policy taken on 1/7 for which the sum assured is rupees 4 lakh and the annual premium is 1,25,000. So yes, how will you deduct the TDS? Whether TDS applicable on this or not under 194 DA? What did we discuss about 194 DA? Yes, students, faster. What will be the TDS? Yes, students. Nobody is able to answer me.
Ma'am, your TDS will be there.
Yeah. What will be the tax impact? At least, you can tell me. We have already discussed about these questions. What are the conditions that we see for LIC proceeds? We see whether the annual premium exceeds the 10% of the sum assured or not. Yes or no? And whether the amount of premium is more than rupees 2.5 5 lakhs. If that be the case, then the proceeds received from the LIC are not considered as exempt. Yes or no?
Yes.
Under 56(2), if you remember, we have already dealt with so many examples on this point. If the amount is less than 2.5 lakh and if the premium is less than 10% of the sum assured, then in that case, the amount of the LIC maturity proceeds will be exempt under 1010D. Whether these conditions are satisfied in this case? Yes or no? So the annual premium, which is there here, what is the annual premium? 1,25,000. What is 10% of sum assured?
40,000.
40,000. So therefore, the annual premium exceeds the 10% of the sum assured. Therefore, definitely the maturity proceeds of 4.5 lakh are not exempt under 1010D, which means this will be taxable under 56(2) as income from other source. So here we are required to deduct the TDS. What will be the TDS rate? What will be the TDS rate?
5%?
It will be 5% under 194DA. Yes, Satish Kumar. It will be 5%. So 5% on what amount we will apply? 5% of what amount 194DA will be applicable? Yes. So students, if you see here, we have already done 194DA. Here, the sorry, not 5%, it will be 2%. It will be 2% after 110/2024. But if it is before 110/2024, it will be 5%. So here, if you see, this is on 30th June 2024, right? So 30th June 2024 is obviously before 110/2024, the amount is received. So therefore, we are applying the 5% because after 110/2024, the rate is made to 2%. If you see here 194DA, the rate has been reduced from 5% to 2% with effect from 110/2024, right? So this is before that. So we are applying the 5% rate over here. But 5% of what amount? So 5% of the amount of income. Of the amount of income. Now here, what will be my income? What is my income over here?
4,50,000 minus 1,25,000 premium paid.
Correct. Absolutely. Very good. So here, my premium amount which is there is how much? The maturity proceeds, which is 4.5 lakh, right? Minus the premium which has been paid. But premium which you have paid is not just 1,25,000. How much is the exact premium? Do we take only 1,25,000? When was the policy taken? In 2021, right? So, what will be my premium? Will it be only 1,25,000? Yes.
And then we will 1,25,000 will be multiplied by 4 years.
For 3 years, right? Because the policy is maturing in 2024,
Yes, ma'am. 3 years.
right? So, yes, you are right. So what we will be doing here is we will be reducing 4 lakh. So here you can just write down. Yes. Here 194 DA. The TDS is on income and not on the receipts. So what is my income? Income is basically my maturity proceeds minus the aggregate premium paid. And here you can just write down 5% before 1, 10, 24. Are we clear, students? Yes or no? Yes or no? Any questions, any doubt with respect to this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am. Clear, ma'am.
then fine. Any other question? Fine. Okay, so let's then proceed further. So we are now moving towards the next section. Let me share it. Yes. So 194 DA is done. EEE we have already done in the last class. 194 G. Commission on sale of lottery tickets. Lottery tickets के लिए हमने कुछ और भी किया था. Which section was that? Yes, students.
194B.
What was that on?
एक मिनट. इनकम फ्रॉम लॉ. मैम नेम पूछ रहे हो आपके?
Yes, yes.
इनकम फ्रॉम लॉटरी, गैम्बलिंग.
Winnings from lottery. Yes. That was 194B was winnings from lottery or crossword puzzle, game, betting, gambling. This is commission on sale of lottery ticket. Are you getting the difference? वो था that if I win a lottery or a crossword puzzle or card game or any sort of betting, gambling like that, this is commission on sale of lottery tickets. Are we clear? So that is under 194G. Now what they are trying to say is any person who is responsible for paying to any person who is or has been stocking, distributing, purchasing or selling lottery tickets, any income by way of commission, remuneration or price on such tickets in an amount exceeding rupees 15,000. So here the threshold which is given is 15,000. Deductor is any person. Deductee is any person. Shall at the time of credit or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier. So again, timing is credit or payment, whichever is earlier. Deduct the TDS at the rate of 2%. Now, if you see, even this has changed with effect from October 10, 1st October. So it is 2% or 5% before 1st October 2024. Are we clear? So this is a very simple section which is there, which says again here the rate has been changed from 5% to the 2%. Right? So this is the commission which they are talking about and not the winnings. Winnings के ऊपर is under 194B. That is when you win a lottery. This is when you are a commission agent for that lottery. Is the distinction clear, students?
Yes, ma'am.
So win the prize money on the unsold lottery ticket. So whether that would be assessed as business income or whether it would be income from other source. Do you remember this case? CIT versus Manju and Co.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So what was the conclusion achieved in that case? So basically, in that case, it was held that if I am winning a prize money on the unsold lottery ticket, right? So that prize money I'm not winning as a holder of the lottery ticket or as a distributor of the lottery ticket. I am winning that because there was a lottery ticket which was unsold and lying with me, right? So the receipt of the prize money is not in the capacity as a distributor, but as a holder of the lottery ticket. And therefore, this will be income from other source. Also, irrespective of the head, this winnings will be taxable under which section? This winnings will be taxable under which section? Irrespective of which head I put to. What is the tax rate which is going to be applicable for these winnings from the lottery ticket, even for a distributor? 115BB, right? 30%. Winnings from the lottery tickets are taxable under 115BB at the rate of 30%, and the TDS also will be 194B at the rate of 30%. Is this clear? Yes or no, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you have to recollect these points because whenever I say something, it should strike in your mind that, okay, see, I have also not prepared and come for this lecture that I now remember this thing. But it's just that while I was teaching to you, I myself got struck that, okay, I had taught something about this case law. And that's the reason why I'm able to link it here. So that should be how your preparation should also be, that whenever you write something, you should remember, हाँ, यहाँ पर ये लिखा हुआ था. Right? Okay. So let's proceed further then towards the next section, which is 194H. 194H is the commission or the brokerage. This is the general commission. Or the brokerage. So I'll again just copy paste this thing and write here. Okay. Now here what they are saying, any person not being an individual or HUF who is responsible for paying to a resident any income by way of commission not being the insurance commission or brokerage. So here what they are trying to say is any person, first of all, deductive shall at the time of credit or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier. So timing is credit or payment, whichever is earlier. Deduct the income tax at the till 1/10/24. So here also you have to write 2% or 5% before 1/10/24. Provide of income which are credited. So the threshold here is rupees 15,000. Provided further that an individual or HUF whose total sales, gross receipts or turnover exceed 1 crore, or in the case of profession 50 lakh rupees, then in that particular case he will be liable to deduct income tax under this section. So here individual or HUF having turnover greater than rupees 1 crore will be required to deduct the commission, the TDS on the commission or brokerage which is being paid. Now here students understand that there are certain points with respect to this particular provision. Advertisement company receives the amount for the advertisement by the client. And this the first type of payment when the client pays to the advertising agency. There will be a works contract. There will be TDS under 194C, under 194H. I told you that CBDT has clarified that the TDS advertising agency. Here, there is a clear-cut CBDT circular with respect to that effect. But in the last class, we had also done one particular case of Doordarshan. Do you remember what was that? What was that Doordarshan case? Yes. What was Doordarshan case, students? Yes, students, you are not responding. So if you remember, I had told you in the Doordarshan case, because of those specific facts of those cases, we had concluded that yes, in that particular case, yes, Satish Kumar, Doordarshan pay the commission by way of the net payment receipt. So yes, whether the TDS would have been applicable on that under 194H, the answer is yes. So in that case, if you remember, we had discussed that in that case, there is a specific, yes, Satish Kumar, very good, that there is a commission which is being paid by Doordarshan to the advertisement companies, and that is these companies were operating specifically for that purpose of earning the business for Doordarshan, right? So in that particular case, we noted that yes, there will be the TDS under 194H because here there is an agency contract existing between the Doordarshan and the advertising agency. So there the agreement was specifically entered into with C's. In the case, the CBDT has clarified that the relationship between the television companies and the advertising companies is basically that of principal to principal. It is not of principal to agent. However, in Doordarshan case, there were specific agents which were appointed. Whereas if the relationship between the advertising company and the newspaper company is that of principal to principal, there will not be any TDS under 194H. Is this clear? Yes or no? Any questions, any doubts so far? Yes, please, students. Yes? Okay. Okay. Now, next important point with respect to 194H is there are stamp vendors, where it is about the stamp vendors. So stamp vendors, what they do is they purchase these stamp papers, right, on the full price. They will sell these stamp papers for the full price. So difference is basically their margin. So there was this case before the Supreme Court that if these stamp vendors, stamp paper vendors are purchasing these stamp papers at a discount and then selling it at a full price to the customers, will this be constituting commission to attract the provisions of TDS under 194H? So Supreme Court in that case noted that although the stamp vendors are part of agency at any point of time, so for the purposes of 194H, for 194H to get attracted, one person should be acting on behalf of another person. to assist that person to buy or sell his goods or provide the services. Therefore, for 194H commission, there has to be the existence of element of agency. In this case, when the stamp paper vendors buy the stamp papers at a discounted price and then sell these stamp papers to the customers at the full price, here this cannot be said to be an agency business. They are buying the stamp papers on their own account. Therefore, the discount that they are taking while purchasing the stamp papers cannot be said to be the commission or brokerage so as to attract the provision of TDS under 194H. Is this clear? Yes or no? Fine?
Yes,
One another case, which is again the Supreme Court ruling in the case of Prasar Bharati. In the case of Prasar Bharati, or sorry, not Prasar Bharati, the Doordarshan only. So, under that case, again, as I said, that you have to see that whether the contract is of that of agency or not. If the contract is that of agency, then only the 194H will get attracted. Otherwise, there will not be any 194H. Which is this Doordarshan case is with respect to the agency which they have agents which they have appointed under them to generate the business for them. Clear? Next case is of again Supreme Court, which is with respect to the Bharti Cellular Limited. Now, in that case, the question before the Supreme Court was that whether these mobile telephone service providers are required to deduct the TDS under 194H on the recharge vouchers and the startup kits which they purchase at a discounted price. Not they, basically which the distributors purchase at the discounted price and sell it to the final customers at the full price. So just like these stamp papers, if you see the recharge vouchers, these days you are able to recharge the phones directly through the My Airtel app, My Vodafone app or Jio app, right? But in the earlier days, maybe 10 years, 15 years back, when we wanted to recharge our phones, we used to go to the mobile stores, right? Or basically, sometimes these pan walas and also had these recharge vouchers, right? When we were in schools, we used to recharge like that, right? And sometimes even today, if you see, there are these sector of population who are unable to use these mobile apps. They just go to these vendors and get the recharge vouchers and recharge their phone. So that time they used to call it 50 ka talk time, right? So this is how the recharge used to happen. Now the question is that these distributors which are there or the franchisees which are there, they are purchasing these recharge vouchers or the startup kits. Startup kit is basically when you purchase a new phone number, when you take a new phone number, at that time they give you this kit, which is basically your number, first 50 minutes, let's say, or first 1 hour free talk time or 24-hour free talk time. So they give you this startup kit. So these startup kits or these recharge vouchers are purchased by these distributors at the discounted price, which are then sold to you at full price. So the difference between the purchase price and the sell price is nothing but their margin. So the question before the Supreme Court was that is the TDS required under 194H on this discount? So the Supreme Court again here noted that the obligation to the TDS under 194H arises when the relationship is between the two entities as that of principal and agent. So you need to see whether the person is intending to work for himself as an independent contractor or is entitled to a commission. If I'm working for my own self, I'll be regarded as an independent contractor and not as a variable percentage also of the sales amount that I'm generating, and then sell purchase price and the sale price. So unlike an agent, this particular distributor does not act as a communicator or as an intermediary between the principal discounted price regardless of and even before the products are being sold and transferred to the final consumer. So even if I'm not selling, even if I'm unable to sell to the final customer, I have to pay the purchase price. Are we clear? So 194H, what do you think will be applicable or not in this case? Yes. So if you see 194H, 194H says what? Commission or brokerage includes any payment received or receivable directly or indirectly by a person acting on behalf of another person for services rendered. So whether I am acting in a way directly or indirectly for the company, for the telecom company. Yes. Yes or no? Whether here this particular telecom company is having the distributor as his agent. Yes.
Ma'am, can you please repeat the case as my PC was and your video gets stuck?
Sure. So the case is that if, let's say, for example, I am a distributor, I am purchasing the vouchers from the Airtel company at a discounted price and then I sell it to the customer at a full price. So the difference between my purchase price and sale price is nothing but my margin. So the question is whether on the purchase price, which is basically a discounted price, so whether this discounted price is or can be called as commission or brokerage. So here it was noted by Supreme Court that 194H requires the person responsible to pay the commission or brokerage to deduct the TDS, right? So if you see 194H, what does it say? Any person who is responsible for paying. Any person who is responsible for paying any commission. Here, the question is that whether the Airtel is in fact paying any commission.
No, ma'am,
Are we clear?
it's not a commission. They are purchasing the coupon or vouchers.
Yeah. So, here Airtel is first of all not paying. It is the particular distributor who is purchasing at discount and selling at full price. So, here what the revenue was trying to argue is that the commission includes any payment received directly or even indirectly. So even if I am not receiving the payment from the Airtel company, but even if indirectly I am earning the profits, whether it can be called as commission. So the court said no. In the current case, the Airtel is not paying any commission to the distributor. The Airtel is not even aware about the fact that at what price the distributor is going to sell these particular vouchers to the customer. So it is impossible for Airtel to deduct the TDS and comply with 194H on the difference between the sum collected from the final customers and the price at which the distributor has purchased these vouchers. So therefore, the Supreme Court held that the contractual obligations of the franchisees or distributors are not reflecting that they are agent. In fact, they work on their own account. In fact, they work independently. And therefore, 194H will not be applicable. 194H will not be applicable. Is this clear? Any questions? Any doubts so far? Yes.
Clear, ma'am.
Okay. Fine. Okay. So let's move further. Which is the next section. One second. I. What does 194I say? Any person not being individual or HUF who is responsible for paying to a resident any income by way of rent. So here 194I is on the rent. Yeah. So any person other than individual or HUF, deductee is resident, who is responsible to pay a resident any income by way of rent shall at the time of credit or at the time of payment deduct the income tax at the rate of, so two rates are given, 2% for the use of plant and machinery or equipment. So what is it? 2% of the 2% of the plant and machinery or equipment. Yeah, 2% of the plant and machinery or equipment. Okay. Then for the use of land or building or any land appurtenant thereto or any furniture of it, it is going to be 10%. Okay. Then what it says, provided that no deduction under this section shall be made, as the case may be, if the aggregate amount of income credited or paid during the financial year does not exceed rupees 2,40,000. So the threshold here is 2,40,000. Right? Now, tell me one thing. Is this 2,40,000, which is the threshold, is it for A point as well as B point, which is for the plant and machinery as well as for the land and building, or is it a combined threshold? Just read across this particular proviso and let me know what is this 2,40,000 for about. Yes. Yes, faster. What is this 2 lakh limit, 2,40,000 limit for?
Ma'am,
Where
it's an aggregate.
So meaning it is for both of them?
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody thinks it's for one? Yes. Yes or no? Anyone thinks it's for one of them? Or it's for both? Both? Because it says the aggregate of the amount. It says aggregate of the amount of income. So this 240,000 threshold which is given is a total threshold. It's not one-to-one threshold. Mind it. This is a total threshold of 240,000 which is given. You can't say that 240 will be for one asset and 240 for another. So even if you, let's say for example, let's say I am entering into an agreement for a building and the building has also machinery. So I enter into two separate agreements with my landlord. One for building, one for machinery. And the total lease charges are less than 240 in each of the agreement. Whether will you apply the TDS on that or not?
Ma'am, no TDS.
Why no TDS? You said 240 is for both the agreements.
Ma'am, you said that both of them is less than 240.
Yes. So you don't look into for each agreement. The agreement is with one same person. Let's say there is this one landlord, Mr. A, with whom I am entering into two separate agreements, one for the lease of building, one for the hiring of the machinery. And the charges under the two agreements are less than 240,000. Will the TDS be applicable is the question. Yes.
Ma'am, I
Yes,
think,
please be faster. Yes.
ma'am, I think here mentioned is the payee. So I think its aggregate is should consider for all the payees together. Is it, ma'am?
You're saying you have to consider the aggregate for both the agreements.
Yes, ma'am. I
So
think
means you
so.
will combine the rental for both the agreements, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And if you see then whether it exceeds 240 or not. Right? So that's the correct approach. So this 240, as I said, is the limit for all the assets. So basically, what you will do is even if you enter into two agreements to one landlord, right? So this is not with respect to one agreement. Are we clear, students? Yes or no? Yes?
Ma'am.
Okay. Now, here again, there are few issues that I would like to discuss. See, everything is present in your module. Do not worry. You can just read for this chapter. Your module is more than sufficient. Okay. So, payment made by the customers on account of cooling charges to the cold storage owners. Whether on that the TDS is applicable or not. So, how does the cold storage works? You as a customer pay to the cold storage owner to store your goods, especially when the goods are cleared from customs or the goods are pending at customs. You pay to the cold storage to just, keep your goods intact so that they are not deteriorating. So in that case, the function of the cold storage is to preserve the perishable goods by means of a mechanical process. So whether in that case, the charges which are paid by customer to the cold storage owner, whether it can be called as rent and whether TDS under 194I is applicable. What do you think? Whether TDS under 194I will be applicable? Yes. Yes, students. Whether the charges that you pay to the cold storage, on that, do you think the TDS should be applicable?
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
Ma'am,
Is it the rent?
no, ma'am. It's a rent for arrangement for the use of equipment. So, or we can say their use of plant, which they. So it's TDS is applicable there.
See, we have to understand. So CBDT has given the circular over here. The CBDT says that the main function that I can preserve my goods, and storage of such goods is incidental in nature. So the customer is not given any dedicated or demarcated space or machinery in the cold storage. And therefore the customer is not a tenant. So therefore it cannot be said to be in the nature of rent. It's just an arrangement between the customers and cold storage owner, which is kind of a contractual in nature, and therefore on that the TDS under 194C should be applicable, because there's a contractual charges kind of thing, which is like a contract existing between the two is being paid. So the money is paid under that contract, and this is not in the nature of rent, which requires a TDS under 194I. Clear? So this is, CBDT has clarified that this is not rent.
Ma'am, if
Yeah.
if a person is taking a cold storage for preserve his goods and whatever foods, so that will come in this or according to 194C.
194C only. So CBDT has given a circular, any kind of cold storage it will go under 194C and not under 194I, because there is no dedicated space which is given under that.
Ma'am, if particular space is mentioned, then it will come in this section.
See, it may be very different in case of the warehouse, for example. So in the case of warehouse, for example, I may have a dedicated space in a warehouse. But in that case, it could be 194I. But where it is pertaining to a cold storage facility, it is in the nature of a contractual payment and will not be under 194C. 194I. It will go under 194C. Clear?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Now, next one is remittance of the passenger service fee by an airline to an airport operator. So what happens? So in the case of the airline operations, okay, the airline companies pay to the airport operator a passenger service fee, right? Now this passenger service fees are paid by the airline company, for example Indigo, to the airline operators, so airport operators Adani, right, for example. So these passenger service fee which are paid by these airline company, whether on that there should be TDS under 194I. That is the question. So a passenger service fee is basically collected from the customers by the airline and paid to the airport authorities. This fee which is paid is basically to use these services and facilities at the airport. Like for example, security, baggage, your escalators, baggage trolleys, air conditioning. So that is a passenger service fee is charged for that. Now the question is on that whether 194I should be applicable. व्हाट डू यू थिंक? क्या करूं? कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ रहा है? अच्छा, अब ठीक है? Okay. Yes. So whether on that the TDS under 194I will be applicable. Read what 194I says. Yes, please tell me. What do you think? Yes, passenger service fee, whether it is requiring the TDS, yes or no? So CBDT has again given a circular to that effect. So there were two judgments around this. One in the case of Japan Airlines, second in the case of Singapore Airlines by the Bombay High Court, wherein it was observed that the requirement for the any payment to qualify as a rent is that the particular payment should be for the usage of the land or building or for the equipment. Yes or no?
Yes,
What
ma'am.
is it rent? How do you characterize a payment as rent? When it is for the use of the land or building. Here, the payments which are made are basically for the purpose of using the airport services as a whole. And if there is incidental usage of the land while using the other facilities, that would not make a payment for the use of land because there's an incidental use of land. Are we getting that? Yes or no?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes. So therefore, there is no rent involved over here. This will not be attracting 194I. Fine. Next one is payment of the lease rent, which is made by a lessee to a lessor which is located in the International Financial Service Center for the lease of an aircraft. What is an International Financial Service Center, students? What's an IFSC? Yes.
Ma'am, it is exchange related centers.
What is it?
Exchange.
No. Anyone has an idea what is IFSC? You must have done chapter 6 से deductions, right? उसमें ATLA करके करवाया होगा. Yes or no? Have you done chapter 6 से deductions? Yes, students, fast. ATLA करके कोई deduction याद आ रहा है कि नहीं? नहीं करवाया है कुछ तो बता दो. No idea. ATLA is not done.
मैम एक्चुअली करवाया था मैम ने.
Hmm.
And she has also told that IFSC is in Gujarat, in
Yeah.
Gift City.
Very good. Yes. But what is it? क्या है IFSC? SEZ क्या होता है?
मैम
Special.
स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक्स जोन जहाँ पे स्पेसिफिक हमें एग्जाम्पशन या डिडक्शंस मिलती है वहां पे इंडस्ट्री सेटअप करने के लिए कुछ
Correct. IFSC बस वही है. See, IFSC is basically जैसे SEZ एक कोई ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई आप अलग एरिया में चले गए हैं वो SEZ है, कोई बड़ा एक कंट्री है, ऐसा नहीं है. SEZ are the designated areas. For example, if you come to Mumbai, you will see Andheri seats. Andheri mein there is an area which is seats, which is a designated SEZ. In different cities, you will find SEZs. So SEZs are nothing but these specified economic or special economic zones, which are designated as SEZ. That if you have the manufacturing units, if you have the export units in there, you will get the deduction under 10AA or 10A, right? So similarly for IFSC units, IFSC is also a designated area in Gujarat. There is only one IFSC in our country, which is called as Gift City, right? In India, it is based in Ahmedabad. Now, ऐसा नहीं कि कोई गिफ्ट सिटी आप चले जाओगे तो कोई ऐसा like you imagine a situation where it's like a fancy city, जैसे क्रिसमस जैसा पूरा डेकोरेट किया हुआ है. It's not like that.
Ma'am,
So, Gift City is basically a normal area. If you go, you will find that it's just another normal area. With ऐसा नहीं कि कुछ उसका अलग से गेट है, आप अंदर जा रहे हो, किसी अलग सिटी में जा रहे हो. No, it's a normal city only. Not even a city, it's part of Ahmedabad. It's just that it is designated as a zone as Gift City or the IFS. So any units, any entities, any operations which are based in Gift City enjoy the deduction under ATL. And there are more exemptions. Like for example, if you remember MAT, Gift City में कितना लगता है? If you have the company and in the Gift City or in IFSC, what is the MAT rate? It's not 15%. What is the rate? Yes, 9%, right? Yes or no? AMT, you have a lesser rate, right? So therefore, there are not many exemptions in the Gift City. So it's a designated zone only. It's just that if you have the operations there, it is considered that it's basically like, you are earning you can trade in foreign exchange over there. You can use the foreign exchange over there. So it's considered as a non-resident zone only. It's considered as a foreign territory for the purposes of FEMA. That's it. Not for the purpose of tax. For the purpose of FEMA, it's considered as a foreign jurisdiction. But it's nothing but ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई borders लगे हुए हैं, कोई gate है जिसके बाद आप एक अलग city में जाते हो. Not like that. It's just a designated zone. It's part of our India only. It's part of Ahmedabad city only. Are we clear? So now here the question is that any payments which are made by way of the lease payments for the lease of aircraft by any lessee to a company or to a unit which is located in IFSC, whether it will attract the TDS, because under 80LA, if you remember, if you are getting the income from the lease of aircraft, you get the deduction under 80LA, right? So for that purpose, if I charge the TDS on you, it will block your funds, because any which ways your income is getting deducted under 80LA. Are you getting this point? Yes or no, students? Is this point being clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So the CG, central government, has given a notification. What notification it has given? That TDS will not be required on the lease rent which is made by the lessee to a lessor, which is basically to a unit in IFSC for lease of an aircraft, subject to the condition that the unit in the IFSC has to give a declaration to his tenant of the 10 years in which they are claiming the deduction under ATLA. Because then only the lessee will not deduct the TDS, right? And this declaration has to be given for each of the years where the deduction is being claimed. Are we clear? Once this declaration is given, then there will not be any TDS on the lease payments which are made. Is this clear? Yes or no?
Yes,
Clear
ma'am.
or not? Yes? Okay. Now, next part is the GST on the rental income. Rental income के ऊपर GST लगता है? Yes or no? There is GST applicable on the rental income?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? So on that, whether you will deduct the TDS or not. So let's say मेरा rental income is 5 lakh, उसके ऊपर GST is 18%. So on what amount I will deduct the TDS? Let me share you the module only so that you can easily see also. Yeah.
Ma'am, TDS will be deducted on the amount before the GST.
Yes. Perfect. So the central CBDT has clarified that the TDS will be on the rent without including the GST. Clear? So that is again a clarification which is given by CBDT. Next is lump sum lease premium paid for acquisition of long-term lease. See, it is very general practice wherein you pay a lump sum lease premium when the lands, buildings are taken by, for example, hotels or hospitals. They pay a premium which is for acquiring the lease of 99 years, for 50 years. So basically in that case, if you see, there is a lump sum lease premium paid, which is not adjustable against the periodic or monthly rent which will be there. This is a lump sum lease premium which is paid, or upfront lease charges which are paid, which will not be adjusted against the future rental payments. This is to acquire the lease for a longer time. Whether on that the TDS will be deducted, the CBDT has said no. Because these are not in the nature of rent, these are in the nature of premiums for acquiring the long-term lease. And therefore, TDS under 194I will not be there. Clear? Next one is concerning the lease of ship. So, any again unit in IFSC which is giving the ship on lease, on that, whether the TDS will be applicable, so same as the aircraft. So, like I told you for the aircraft, that there will not be any TDS if the lessor furnishes the declaration that for these 10 years, I am claiming the deduction under ATLA. Similarly, for aircraft, for ship also, they can give a declaration, the lessor can give a declaration that yes, I am claiming a deduction under ATLA and there should not be any TDS. In that case, the lessee will not deduct the TDS for those periods. Because even for the lease of the ship, there is the deduction available under ATLA on the income from the lease of ship. Is this clear or not, students? Any questions so far? Any doubts so far? Yes? Is the rental part clear?
Ma'am,
Clear, ma'am.
rental part clear है, but I have doubt related to the gift city. Actually, यानी सभी लोग वो आपने भी जैसा कि अभी बोला, it is part of अहमदाबाद, but here we call it is a part of गांधीनगर, then यानी ये अहमदाबाद का गिना जाएगा या फिर गांधीनगर का?
See, Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, there are some cities, which are like, I mean, it's just the municipal corporation which, makes them different. So if you go to Ahmedabad at any point in time, you will see that एक जगह पर जस्ट अहमदाबाद खत्म होता है, वहां से गांधीनगर शुरू हो जाता है.
Yes, ma'am. I am from Ahmedabad.
Okay, you're from Ahmedabad. Okay, good. So you may be knowing that, it's very near to the airport. Now, airport area से ही, if you see this Gandhinagar area starts, ठीक है?
Yes.
Airport के आगे से आप जाओगे तो गांधीनगर आ जाता है. Airport की ये साइड जाओगे तो आप
Yes.
अहमदाबाद में हो.
Yes,
So it's
ma'am.
like that. So, some areas are, falling between Gandhinagar and Ahmedabad. So you can call it anywhere you want to. But at the end of the day, GIFT City is a different zone altogether. It may not be counted in any of those regions because it is governed by entire different authority and not by the local municipal corporation of Ahmedabad or Gandhinagar.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. But for the purposes of, staying there, you may say that whichsoever area it be. Because if you see even in, like for example, city of Pune, there are two cities which are interconnected. One is city of Pune, one is city of Pimpri and Chinchwad. Now, again, both are very, very well connected. So it's just that, you are on either side of it. And you have,
Okay.
which happens, with any of these cities where you have two cities very well connected, and it's just the municipality which is governing them differently. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Okay. Any
Yes.
other question? Yes. Okay. Now coming to the, again, some cases that I want to discuss over here with respect to the rental. Let me again share the screen and take you towards this rental questions. Yes. Yeah. So there's this Japan airline case, which is basically again a Supreme Court decision which says whether landing and parking charges paid by an airline company to the Airport Authority of India, can it be called as rent? So landing and parking charges. So airline companies have to pay the charges to the Airport Authority of India for basically doing the landing in a particular airport or parking the airplanes in a particular airport. So whether they can be called as rent. So as I told you, to call a particular payment as rent, it has to be for the use of the land. If the use is an incidental use, if the use of the land is there, but if you're paying for a composite amount for usage of the facilities, and in that there is an incidental use of land, it may not be called as rent. So here the Supreme Court noted that these charges, which are parking and the landing charges, are for the services and facilities offered in connection with the aircraft operation at the airport, which include providing the air traffic services, ground safety services, the communication facilities to communicate with the pilot, installation and maintenance of the navigational aids, meteorological services. So there are many services which are included in these charges, right? If you see in the plane, the pilot, how does he know that he has to land at a particular spot? How the landing is bang on every time at the same spot? He can't have the visibility there. He's connected with the ground staff, right? So the ground staff is directing him to land in a particular way. So the ground staff is telling him that no, there is an air traffic, there is another plane which is going to land at this moment. So you have time to land, right? So the air traffic service, which is informing him of the aircrafts around it, so that, they are not banging each other in the air also, right? The ground safety services, the aeronautical services, the installation of the navigation systems in the plane sometimes, information about the weather update, how is the weather in that particular area, because if there are a lot of winds, right, they may just hit or they will not be able to land properly. So therefore, in that case, it is important that these services are provided, and for that these landing and parking charges are paid. So the landing charges is not that the only plane niche aa raha hai uske charges hai. So therefore, these charges are not for the use of land only. These are the consolidated facilities which are provided combined facilities provided, one of them includes an incidental use of land, and therefore it cannot be treated as rent within 194I. Clear? Metallic club membership fee, how will it come under rent? Yes.
Ma'am, if there is a rooms available, yeah, other facilities also given by them, and is an annual charges or monthly charges for that.
See, again, it will be the same thing, na? Like, it is the amount which is paid for utilization of facility, which includes the incidental use of the land. So, therefore, it's not a rental payment per se. The same logic will be even applicable over here, right?
Okay, ma'am, I just want clear that it's this logical is apply in all services, or this is
Yes, yes.
particular that one.
No, absolutely not. Okay. Now, next is this Indus Towers case, which is by Delhi High Court. Again, this is that question is whether the payments for the use of the mobile towers will be subject to TDS under 194C or 194I. Now, how does this network operates? So, there are areas where there is low network. There are areas where you get a proper network. How is that there is a low network in a particular area? You have seen so many times that you go in a particular house or you go in a particular area, there is absolutely, less network. You're always saying hello, hello, hello. There's nobody, listening to you. So how is that happening? How does
Ma'am,
this entire scheme operates? Yes.
ma'am, that is depend on that mobile tower range.
Correct.
So,
So if you see, earlier nowadays, there are a lot of health concerns raised about installing the mobile towers on the building. There was a time 15, 20 years back when all the buildings used to install the towers on their terrace. So these towers which are operated or installed, whether the payment which is made to these telecom operators or these towers company, whether there will be TDS under 194I. That's the question. So these tower companies which are there, what they do is they let out their towers to the major telecom operators in the country. So the Airtel, if it has to provide, let's say, the network in a particular area, it has to do by necessarily renting a particular equipment. So whether here 194I is applicable, that's the question. Yes, somebody was telling something.
ma'am, your question is mobile company giving rent to land for, or
Yes.
there is something happen between the telecommunication companies and other networks also. So you asking
No,
about
no.
that.
So the mobile company will be paying the rent to this tower company to rent the towers from them. So here, this will be the rent of the equipment. And yes, the TDS under 194I will become applicable. Are we clear? This is not the rent of the land or building. Because if you see, there are two rates which are there. What is the rate for the rent of the land or building? If you see here, we have written 2% if the plant and equipment is there. 10% for the land and building. So here, which TDS will be applicable? The court has said, Delhi High Court has said that 2% will be applicable and not 10%. Why? Because the dominant intention was to use the equipment, that is the infrastructure, and the use of premises are only incidental. And therefore, tax will be deducted at 2% and not at the rate of 10%. Is this clear?
Clear,
Yes
ma'am.
or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next is the senior manager of SBI, Allahabad High Court case. In that case, the question was that in respect of a co-owned property, the 2,40,000 limit which is there under 194I, will it be applicable for each co-owner, or is it concerning one property? So the Allahabad High Court noted that if you remember section 26, the co-owners of the house property, we have dealt this point also while we were dealing AOP. The co-owners of the house property are not assessable as AOP. Do you remember this point or not? I told you that. While we were doing AOP, I told you that the co-owners of the house property cannot be considered as the association of person. Yes?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
therefore, in this case, the payment of the rent is made to a separate owners by way of separate check. And their share was also definite. So therefore, the limit of 2,40,000 is applicable to the each co-owner, and it is not applicable to the property in general. It is not necessary that the property has to be divided between the two owners. It is fine if the share of the income is definite in the hands of each co-owner and separate checks were issued to them. If it would have been a case where, just two co-owners are mentioned in the agreement, we see a lot of agreement where spouse is mentioned, mother is mentioned, but all the amount is contributed by one person who is earning the income. In that case, yes, one may say that 240 is applicable to one person only because the other person is not really the co-owner, he's just named in the agreement. But where here it was seen that by way of a separate check, the payments were being made. So therefore, the threshold limit of 240 was considered for both of them. Clear? Next decision for 194I. It is concerning whether the payment which is made by the transport company to the contractors for hiring the dumpers, will it be treated as rent for machinery or equipment for TDS under 194I? So basically the question here is that whether this contract is for the contract of transportation of goods or for hiring of the equipment. So if you see that and it hired the dumpers to transport those goods. So here the Gujarat High Court hiring only dumpers. It is not hiring dumpers and then it is, putting its own drivers. It is having the contract to transport the goods. And therefore, the court held that this is not a payment of rent. So 194I will not be applicable. This is a contract of transportation and will be covered under which section, students? Contract of transportation is under which section?
94C.
194C because it's a works contract. Clear? And if you remember, I told you for the works contract on transportation, there will not be TDS if, what is the condition? For the transportation, there will not be TDS if the, which condition is satisfied? Yes. What was the condition? If there are less than 10 vehicles. Yes or no? We discussed that day. Yes. Right? Nobody is answering me. Yes or no, students? 194C, what was the condition? Yes, fine. Payment to contractors for the transportation.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Correct? Yes. Okay. Perfect. Now, the last one case before we take the break is again concerning the Singapore Airlines Limited, which is on the 194H, not on 194I. But let me take up this case. So, what happens is, in the case of the airline company, there is this, if you book the tickets, there is this base fare which is there, right? Which is set by the International Air Transport Association. So basically, the airlines can sell the tickets at a fare lower than the base fare, but not the higher. So have you seen that when you try to book the tickets to Make My Trip, suddenly the price increases? They don't alter the base fare. The base fare remains the same. Then the charges can get varied, right? Or sometimes they will alter the base fare itself, which is again set by the International Air Transport Association. So they cannot go beyond that. They can come, of course, lower than that. So therefore, they are required to provide a fare list to the DGCA, which is Director General of Civil Aviation, for the approval. So the prices which are then approved by the DGCA, then you can keep that price, or lower than the base fare, you cannot go higher. Now what happens is, how does Make My Trip, GoIbibo sell these ticket of Indigo, Air India? How do they do that? So the International Air Transport Association provide the blank tickets to these companies to market and sell the travel tickets. Now the arrangement between the, let's say, Air India and Make My Trip would be governed by a passenger sales agency agreement. The passenger sales agency agreement, it says that the travel agent or this like companies like Make My Trip can sell the flight tickets along with the ancillary services like add-on meals, the selected seats, lounge services, or for that matter, if you see premium additional baggage services. Now, once these tickets will be sold, a fixed percentage of commission, which is again set by the International Aviation, right? Which is again set by the International Air Transport Association. That fixed commission would be paid to the Make My Trip for the services as a standard commission based on the base fare set by the International Air Transport Association. So if you see, when you try to book the tickets, you just, press on the price once and you will see the base fare. There are certain passenger service fee. There is this commission of the Make My Trip, and finally the amount will be there. Now, if you see, sometimes there is a difference between the fare which is on the Make My Trip and on the Air India's independent website. Right? So the question here is that this standard commission which is there, which is paid on the base charges, that is any which way subjected to TDS under 194H. Right? Now, it is quite possible that these Make My Trip, what they may try to do is, they may try to keep a different pricing, which is not, of course, higher than the base fare, but which is different from the fare which is quoted by the airline company. Let's say rupees 1,000. Let's say we are coming from Mumbai to M. 3,000 will of the Make My Trip. Now, in case you go on to the Air India website, you may see that the charge is 2,500. But Make My Trip is charging 3,000. Are you getting? So basically that is because the commission or the price may be different at which the Air India is selling. So because Air India can sell at lesser than base price. But Make My Trip is also adding commission to that. Right? So the airlines have no control over the actual fare which is charged by Make My Trip. So the additional amount which is charged by the Make My Trip over and above the fare by the Make My Trip as its own income. Right? Question is on this 500 rupee, the difference between the base fare charged by Air India and the base fare set by Make My Trip, whether on that this supplementary commission, whether the TDS should be applicable. Deduct the TDS on the supplementary commission amount earned as the assessee in default and discussed sometime back. What does 194H talk? So the 194H is basically talking about the relationship between the two parties as that of principal and agent. Now here the court noted that the approval signed between the two. It is not that Make My Trip is independently setting the base fare as 1500 and Air India is doing it at 1000. The Make My Trip has taken the consent of Air India or it is in line with the agreement with the Air India. So therefore, the assessee's argument was that here it is only when the final billings are done at the stage of settlement, the airline company gets to know, okay, this is the actual fare at which the Make My Trip has sold the ticket. So therefore, this is not a contract of agency, but the court said no. The contract of agency does not distinguish in terms of when the commission should be applied, whether it should be decided at the outset or should it be told at the end of the settlement. Here, you have given the discretion to the travel agent company to set an actual fare above the fare which is displayed on the Air India's website. That does not affect the nature of relationship, whether it's agency or not. So you have clearly given this discretion to them that you can earn a which I have put it on my website compared to yours, but you should not go below the base fare. They are acting in a fiduciary capacity. You cannot say that, okay, you do not have control over the actual fare charged by Make My Trip, so therefore it's not a contract of agency. The contract agreement clearly says that all monies which are received by Make My Trip will be considered as property of Air India until the settlement. So means it is operating as an agent. Also, you cannot say that since the amounts are retained by the Make My Trip and then passed on to us by retaining their commission, we cannot deduct TDS. No. So once the payment of the amounts are happening, it would be possible for the airline company to deduct the TDS on this additional commission. Because they know that at the end of the cycle, this is what is the commission retained by them. So therefore, there should be the TDS applicable on it. Are we clear? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am, clear, but
Yeah.
I also want to ask something that just like this airline and the Make My Trip, if we
Yes.
hello,
Yeah, please go ahead.
if we recharge our mobile on Google Pay, then it will also collect 1.90 rupees over and above the recharge amount that the company is defined for this. And then also it is also considered as the commission, and the 194H will be applicable over here.
Yeah. Good question. See, when you recharge the mobile, it's just like, what we discussed that earlier, it used to be recharge vouchers were used to be with the distributors. So this was considered as discount and not commission because they were operating on principal to principal basis. Again, we need to see the agreement that Google Pay has with the particular this telecom operator companies. If it is just a kind of discount, it is operating on a principal to principal basis, it will not be subject to 194H. But in case it says that no, we will retain a commission on whosoever is, paying through us, then in that particular case, it will be, of course, subject to 194H. So we need to see the exact contract to determine whether it is subject to 194H or not.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, you have used the word discount, but it is the price over and above from the amount that the company is defined for that. Then why you have used the word discount?
See, basically what happens, see, when you pay your mobile recharges or mobile bills to GPay, right?
Yes.
You are paying because it is offering you the discount vis-a-vis when you directly pay through the Airtel's or Vodafone's app, right? So that is basically the discount amount which is there. Now there may be an arrangement between the Airtel and Google Pay in which what they will be doing is, let's say your recharge amount is of, let's say, 100 rupees. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
Google Pay would be saying that you give me these recharge vouchers. I will allow the customers to pay through my app. Then in that particular case, I will purchase it at the price of, let's say, 80. And to the customer, I'm settling it for 90. So you are seeing that 10 rupees is discount, but in fact, the 10 rupees is also earned by Google. So that way, it may be a principal to principal basis. But quite possible, what may also be happening is that Google Pay may be saying that, okay, I will be paying you 90 back, okay, or 80 back, because 10% will be my commission on the 90 rupees, which I have earned from the customer. So in that case, it will be subject to 194H. Fine?
Ma'am, again, I could not clear that much. मैं हिंदी में बोल रही
Yes,
हूँ.
please go ahead.
मैम, जैसे कि मैंने 100 रुपए का रिचार्ज करवाया, तो गूगल पे मुझसे 101 रुपए 90 पैसा लेता है ना? तो वो तो ज्यादा हुआ, तो फिर ये डिस्काउंट कैसे हुआ? मैं यहाँ पे
Okay, understood. I didn't understand your question then in that case. So 101 रुपए जो आपसे ले रहा है ना, वो basically could be the charges which the Google Pay is charging you in terms of or Google Pay is charging to the Airtel company also maybe. So those charges are basically over and above your this particular recharge amount, and on that charges it's not basically a commission. It is the charge which you're paying to Google Pay. It may be a commission which may be charged to the Airtel. So if it's a commission which is charged to Airtel, we need to see the specification of those, what is the wordings of those charge which they are using. If it's a charge which is being charged to the Airtel company and then recovered from you, then in that case, yes, 194H will be applicable on that 1 rupee.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah?
Yes, ma'am. Now clear. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. So let's take a break here and then we again start with the rest of the sections. So a very short break of 5 minutes because we have to finish off this chapter. So let's take a break of 5 minutes and then of course we are going to extend it after 9 also because we have to cover up too many sections now. Fine?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah. Students, one second, let me reshare the screen. Yeah. Next is 194 IA, which is payment on transfer of immovable property other than agricultural land, right? So rural agricultural land is any which ways not treated as capital asset. So this is for other than agricultural land. So any person which is being a transferee responsible for paying other than the person referred to in 194 LA. 194 LA we'll see separately, to a resident transferor any sum by way of consideration for transfer of any immovable property other than the agricultural land. So basically we are talking about section 194 IA. Transfer of immovable property other than agricultural land. Fine.
Notes screen is not visible.
Sorry,
Notes screen is not visible.
it's
Income
not
tax.
visible. Okay, one second. अभी आया?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So okay. Deductor is any person. Deductee is a resident. Fine. Shall at the time of credit or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier. So timing is credit or payment, whichever is earlier. Deduct then amount equal to 1% of the sum or the stamp duty value of such property, whichever is higher. Right? So therefore, TDS on 1% of the consideration or the stamp duty value, whichever is higher. No deduction under subsection 1 shall be made where the consideration for the transfer of immovable property and the stamp duty value of property are both less than 50 lakh. So what is the threshold? The consideration or the stamp duty value are less than rupees 50 lakh. Are we clear? Provided that where there is more than one transferor or transferee in respect of an immovable property, then the consideration shall be the aggregate of the amount paid or payable by all the transferees to the transferor or all the transferors for transfer of such immovable property. Now, what does it mean? So, see, earlier, just like, for the rental under 194I, what did I tell you? The 2,40,000 limit which is there was considered in respect of each co-owner, right? That was the Allahabad High Court case that we discussed. Similarly, here also, since there was no express mention, the people were trying to say that this 50 lakh limit which is there, this is applicable for each transferor. So now they have clarified that in case there is more than one seller or more than one buyer, the consideration for the purpose of TDS shall be clubbed and shall not be considered qua each transferor or each transferee. And this is effective from 1/10/2024. Which means this is the latest update which has been introduced. Are we clear? Yes?
Ma'am.
Secondly, what they are saying here is, what is the meaning of consideration for the transfer of immovable property? So this consideration shall include all the charges, not only the property purchase charge, but even the charges which are basically the ancillary charges like car parking fees. So when you purchase an immovable property, the builder charges you some additional charges for purchasing a parking, for club membership. They take, membership there nowadays in the societies or big projects. If you see, they are they are having these clubhouses. So they basically charge the fees for using that clubhouse in the initial property purchase only for 1 or 2 years. Electricity or water facility fee, maintenance fee, they take maintenance for first 5 years in the first agreement itself. So all of those charges will be considered for the purpose of deduction of TDS. So TDS will not be only on the basic purchase price, but will include all these charges. Are we clear? Yes or no? Shall we look at one question now?
Ma'am?
So if you see, Mr. X, yes.
Excuse me, ma'am. Hello.
Yes, please. Yes.
Ma'am, can you explain again the update, the latest update you have explained?
Yeah. So as I said, even under 194I for the rent, as I said, the 2,40,000 is applicable qua each owner if the property is co-owned with respect to the rental, right? So the 2,40,000 का जो लिमिट था 194I में कि 240 के नीचे TDS नहीं है, वो 240 का लिमिट एक एक co-owner के लिए अप्लाई होगा, right? We saw that case also. Similarly, here also under 194I, people were taking the stand कि अगर 1 crore का property है, so 50 lakh is for let's say me and 50 lakh let's say is for my husband. So दोनों को TDS नहीं apply होगा because the limit is 50 lakh, right? So the properties are usually co-owned between husband, wife, mother, daughter, mother, son, right? So they were applying this 50 lakh qua each owner. So the Income Tax Act has now clarified from 1st October 24 that this 50 lakh limit is not to be seen qua each owner. So the consideration for the property is to be clubbed for all the transferors, for all the transferees. There may be joint buyers, there may be joint sellers, but the consideration paid to all of them have to be clubbed. So अगर 50 crore मुझे पे हुआ है, 50 crore मेरे husband को पे हुआ है, so the property value will not be considered, like the TDS will not be for 50 lakh and 50 lakh. We will see for 1 crore, we will club the considerations and see whether the TDS should be applicable.
And TDS, who will be paid the TDS in whose name?
So the buyer will deduct the TDS before making the payment for the purchase of property. The buyer will deduct the TDS on account of the seller.
Actually, अगर यानी दो को ओनर हैं तो पहले हम 50-50 यानी अगर थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट एक्सीड करता है तो 50-50 बोथ हैव टू पे, बट नाउ द clubbed amount we will consider. Then if there is co-owner, then who will pay the TDS?
You will deduct in the co-owner's PAN only. तो ऐसा नहीं होगा कि आप बोलोगे कि TDS ही नहीं है, कि अभी तो आप कंबाइन कर रहे हो तो 1 crore हो गया प्रॉपर्टी का वैल्यू. तो पहले क्या होता था, हम बोलते थे TDS ही नहीं है. अब मैं बोल रही हूँ TDS है तो दोनों के पैन पे डिडक्ट होगा. So there will be two sellers on whose account the TDS will be deducted by let's say 2 buyers.
ओके मैम, यानी उनके दोनों की जो भी पर्टिकुलर अमाउंट है उस पे हम TDS डिडक्ट कर.
Yes.
ओके
Fine.
क्लियर.
So now see, Mr. X has sold his house property in Bangalore as well as his rural agricultural land for a consideration of 60 and 15 lakh respectively to Mr. Y on 1/8/24. He has purchased the house property and the land in year 2023 for 40 lakh and 10 lakh respectively. The stamp duty value on the date of transfer, that is on 1/8/24, is 85 lakh and 20 lakh for the house property and rural agricultural land respectively. So first, tax implications in the hands of Mr. X. So hands of Mr. X, whether 50C will be applicable. So first of all, if you see, rural agricultural land is not a capital asset. तो उसके लिए तो gain जो भी आएगा, that is completely not taxable, right? It is not exempt. What you will say, it's not taxable because it is not a capital asset. There is no exemption given. Exemption matlab income taxable hai, but exemption hai. Here we are saying that this is not at all taxable, right? Because this is not a capital asset. Now, with respect to the house property, the stamp duty value is 85 lakh. Is it exceeding 110% of the sale consideration? Yes or no? Is 85 lakh more than 110% of 60 lakh?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so we will take 85 lakh as the FVC. So 85 minus the purchase price, which is 40 lakh. This will be my capital gain. Now, whether it will be short term or long term, this is short term because this is purchased in 23, sold in 24. We are taking 24 months as the holding period. So this will be a short term capital gain. Correct? In the hands of Mr. Y, will there be any implication? For rural agricultural land in the hands of Mr. Y, will there be any implication?
No, ma'am.
No, because it's not a capital asset. And 56(2)(10) says that if the property is received for inadequate consideration. Now, property means a capital asset. So, rural agricultural land is not a capital asset. So, 56(2)(10) is not applicable. What about the house property? Whether 56(2)(10) will be applicable? So, again, will you take the stamp duty value first of all? Yes. We'll take the stamp duty value, right? Because 85 lakh is more than 110% of 60 lakh. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So in case the year immovable property is received for the inadequate consideration. The immovable property here is received for inadequate consideration. How will you decide what is inadequate consideration? So the difference between the stamp duty value and the actual sale consideration, which is 85 minus 60 lakh. If it exceeds rupees 50,000 and 10% of the consideration. So 85 minus 60 lakh is 25 lakh. This exceeds 50,000. And this is also more than 10% of 60 lakh. So 56(2)(10) will get attracted in the hands of Mr. Y. What will be the amount which will be taxable in the hands of Mr. Y? It will be 85 lakh minus 60 lakh, which is the inadequate consideration, right? He should have paid 85 lakh, but he's paying 60 lakh. So therefore, this 25 lakh will be income of Mr. Y. Are we clear? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Now, what will be the TDS obligation for Mr. Y? What will be the TDS obligation for Mr. Y?
TDS on consideration value only?
No. So just now I said, what is the TDS on? TDS is on 1% of higher of the stamp duty value or the consideration, whichever is higher. Right? So what is higher? 85 or 60?
85, ma'am.
85. So Mr. Y will deduct 1% on 85 because this exceeds 50 lakh. So on 85 lakh, this comes to 85,000 will be the TDS. On rural agriculture land, there will not be any TDS. Are we clear about this question? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Now let's move to the next section. This is 194 IB. 194 IB is any person being an individual or HUF other than those referred to in second proviso to 194I. What is referred to in 194 as second proviso? Individual or HUF. Second proviso means this is first proviso provided further is second proviso. This was referring to individual or HUF whose total sales exceeds 50 lakh, 1 crore or gross receipts exceed 50 lakh. So what 194IB is saying, here we are trying to cover any person who is an individual or HUF other than the one who is covered under 194I section. So section 194IB is again TDS on the rent only. 194I was also TDS on rent. But here the deductor will be only individual and HUF. Now you will say individual and HUF was also covered under 194I. Right? Under 194I also this was TDS on rent only. But here also we had individual or HUF. But which individual or HUF? Having the turnover more than, having the turnover more than 10 crore, 1 crore or gross receipts rupees 50 lakh. Here we are saying that individual or HUF which are other than covered under 194I, that is not having turnover more than rupees 1 crore or gross receipts greater than rupees 50 lakh. So here only those individuals or HUFs are covered which do not have turnover more than 1 crore or gross receipts more than 50 lakh. Because if an individual or HUF has turnover more than 1 crore or gross receipts more than 50 lakh, they will go to 194I. They will have to deduct the TDS as per 194I. If I have less than that amount, then I have to deduct TDS under 194IB. So if you have rent, there are two TDS sections which are applicable. If you are any other person other than individual or HUF, or if you are an individual or HUF having the turnover more than 1 crore or gross receipts more than 50 lakh, then you are required to deduct TDS under 194I. If you are individual or HUF having turnover less than 1 crore or gross receipts less than 50 lakh, then you are under 194I. Now this 194IB has been specifically introduced to cover individuals or HUF which are not covered under 194I. Are we getting this? So here what they are saying, who is responsible for paying to a resident? So deductee is again here a resident. Any income by way of rent exceeding rupees 50,000 for a month or part of the month. So threshold is rupees 50,000 per month. Are we clear? Shall deduct an amount equal to 2%, or it used to be before this 5%. So 5% before 1/10/24. Shall deduct the TDS. Are we clear? Shall deduct an amount. The amount referred to in subsection 1 shall be deducted on such income at the time of credit of the rent for the last month of the previous year or the last month of tenancy if the property is vacated during that year, as the case may be, to the account of pay or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier. So the TDS shall be deducted at the time of credit of the rent for the last month or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier. So again, credit or the payment, whichever is the earlier. Now, if you see what they are trying to say here is that the provisions of section 203A shall not apply to a person who is required to deduct TDS in accordance with the provision of this section. Which means what? That the TAN number need not be obtained by such individuals or HUF. So here, TAN is not required. So if you remember, I told you that day that if you have to deduct TDS, you need to obtain a tax deduction account number. Now, in this case, even in this case of 194I, the TAN is not required, meaning these are the deductions which will be done only through your PAN account. Because for TAN, see, if you would have ever done these TDS payments, you would know practically you can do the payments only through the incometax.gov.in. Earlier, we used to have TIN NSDL. Now we can only do it through incometax.gov.in. So how do you log into incometax.gov.in? Your username is what? Your PAN number. But in case you are a tax deductor, you have a separate login through your TAN. You have a separate login through your TAN. But in case you are deducting the tax on the immovable property sale or on the rent, where your total turnover or gross receipts are less than 1 CR or 50 lakh, then you need not obtain a TAN specifically, because these sections are trying to cover the normal individuals who are not into business. These are one-time payments that they are making, or these are not into the business, so they don't need to obtain a separate TAN. These payments work through the PAN. So through the PAN only, you can deduct the TDS. You need not operate a separate TAN number. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, for
Yes.
194 IA, the payment we have to file the form 26 QB. Is it?
Correct. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Clear.
Okay. Now, here, this last point which is there, that in a case where the tax is required to be deducted as per provisions of section 206AA, such deduction shall not exceed the amount of rent payable for the last month or for the last month of tenancy. So you can just write this point. We will discuss it at the end. So you can just write here, in case of section 206AA applicability, TDS shall not exceed the rent per month. Okay. So just simply write this, but we will discuss in a short while. Fine. So this completes your 194IB. Now moving to 194IC. This is a very simple section. This we have already done, so I will not spend much time on this. By the time I read it, you have to recollect where we have done. Okay. Notwithstanding anything contained in 194IA, any person responsible for paying to a resident any sum by way of consideration, not being the consideration in kind, which means the cash consideration only, or the consideration by way of the bank transfers, under the agreement referred to in section 45(5)(a), shall at the time of credit of such sum to the account of payee, or at the time of payment in cash, check, draft, any other mode, whichever is earlier, deduct an amount equal to 10% of such sum as income tax. Where have we done? Nobody recollected?
Ma'am, it is from capital gain.
Correct. What was the provision? Yes. Joint development agreement.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Under joint development agreement, if you remember, we have discussed that the developer acquires the land, right, from the landowner. And then in consideration of that, he will give a flat in that project. So when you give a flat in that project, on that amount, there will not be any TDS because it says for the consideration other than in kind. It is if he gives additional consideration in cash also to him. So on that amount, there will be TDS under 194 IC at the rate of 10%. Right? So this does not mean that only cash, meaning the actual cash consideration. It could be even the bank consideration. Right? So if that be the case, in that case, there will be TDS under 194 I. So if you see here, we had clearly written in the capital gain chapter also that here there will be the 45 I applicability. And in this case, there will be the TDS under 194 IC. If you see here, we have clearly written. I don't know why this troubles. It just stopped.
Yes, ma'am. It is if exceeds 50 lakh, and then we have to deduct 1% of TDS.
10%. Okay, I think it's just, where was it? Sometimes it just runs very slow. Okay, chalo, we'll proceed further. I think I've explained already. It will start when it has to start. Yeah. So we have already written it's 10%. Okay, so chalo, let's move to the next part. Next section is 194J. Again, a very important section. Any person not being an individual or HUF who is responsible for paying to a resident any sum by way of fees for professional services, fees for technical services, any remuneration or fees for commission by whatever name called other than those on which the tax is deductible under 192 to a director of a company, meaning if it is paid as a salary to a director, 192 will be applicable. If it is paid as a remuneration to the director who is not an employee, then it will be under 194J. Any royalty, any sum referred to in 28(5)(a). What is the sum 28(5)(a)? Yes. So this is on royalties, FTS, remuneration or commission to the director, and what else was it? Fees for professional service, non-compete fees, which is referred to in 28.5. If you remember, non-compete fee is a specific receipt, which is a capital receipt, but specifically charged to tax under PGBP, right? So that is covered under 28.5A. Shall at the time of credit or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier. So again, this is credit or payment, whichever is earlier. Deduct the TDS at the rate of 2% in case of the technical services, or royalty, where royalty is in the nature of consideration for sale, distribution, exhibition of cinematographic film, and 10% in the other cases. So 2% for FTS or royalties on films and 10% for others, right? Provided that no deduction under this section shall be made, where the amount of such sum, or as the case may be, the aggregate of the amounts of such sum credited or paid during the financial year by the person to the account of the pay does not exceed 30,000 in the year. The thresholds which are given are 30,000 for the fees for professional service, 30,000 for the fees of technical service, 30,000 for the royalty, and 30,000 for the 28.5. What is 28.5? Non-compete fee. Are we clear? So if you see here, what they have tried to say is that this 30,000 limit which is there is individually applicable to these fees which are there. Are we applicable? See, for the 194I, what did I tell you? 2,40,000 is the consolidated limit for the assets as well as for the land and building. But here, they have given under 194J individual limits for the fees for professional service, for the fees for technical service, for the royalty, and for the non-compete fee. So this 30,000 limit is applicable separately for these. So which implies that if a payment is made to one person for professional fees also, for let's say royalties also, then 30,000 will be applicable. Let's say I'm making a payment. Let's say, for example, let's take an example over here. Let's say I'm making a payment to Mr. A. Let's say 5,000 for fees for technical service. Let's say 20,000 for royalties. And let's say 10,000 for non-compete fee. Will the TDS be applicable to Mr. A? On the payments being made to Mr. A? Yes. Will the TDS be applicable? Yes or no? Faster, students. No, right? Because this 30,000 limit is given. Yes or no? So on this 30,000 limit which is given, there will not be any TDS applicable because 30,000 limit is not breached for any of this. We don't need to see the aggregate amount, students. We have to see the consolidated figure. But no, we don't need to see the consolidated figure. We have to apply the separate limit over here. Are we clear?
Yes.
Any questions? Any doubts so far? Okay.
Ma'am, there is any number limit of separate transaction?
Number limit
Like
as in?
12 in aggregate if we made a payment in every week or monthly, then also
No, that like 194C you were saying, monthly and the annual limit.
okay.
That is not there. Okay. For if you see the remuneration or commission to director, for this I have not given any limit, because for this there is no limit. So here for the remuneration to the director, there is absolutely no limit, meaning if you pay even 1 rupee to the director, there will be TDS on that. Are we clear? Fine. So this is under 194J. Now additionally under 194J, there are certain points that we need to note. For example, if we move further to this particular section, it says, provided further that an individual or HUF whose total sales, gross receipts or turnover exceed 1 crore or 50 lakh, then he is required to deduct the income tax under this section. Provided also that no individual or HUF referred to in second proviso shall be liable to deduct income tax by way of fees for professional services in case such sum is credited or paid exclusively for the personal purpose of the individual member or for the individual or member of HUF. Meaning what they are trying to say is here any person will also here include individual or HUF if turnover exceeds rupees 1 crore or gross receipts greater than rupees 50 lakh, right? But if the payments are for personal purpose of individual or HUF, then no TDS. Fine. Provided that the provisions of this section shall have the effect as if for the words 10%, the word 2% shall be substituted if the payee is engaged in the business of operation of call center. So here what they are saying is that for the call centers operation, again the TDS will be 2%. Clear? Professional services shall mean services rendered by a person in the course of carrying on legal, medical, engineering, architectural, accountancy, technical consultancy, interior decoration or advertising, or such other profession as notified by the board for the purposes of section 44AA. So 44AA is maintenance of the books of accounts in those whatever professions are notified, which will be applicable here also similarly, right? So what are the notified professionals? Sport persons, umpires, coaches, physicians, event managers, anchors, commenters, sport columnists. So all of those are notified professionals. Okay? What is fees for technical service? Fees for technical service is again defined under section 917, which you will learn in international tax class, which is basically managerial, technical or consultancy service. Royalty is also defined under 916. Again, you will see that in the international tax class. What is the meaning of royalty in detail? Okay. Then finally, yeah, I think that's it. Okay. Now, one more important point over here, that if there are these third-party administrators, what are third-party administrators? So what happens in the case of insurance? When you clear your bills in the hospital, they ask you for the insurance, right? So there are these third-party administrators who basically help you clearing these insurances to the hospital. So you see there are these TPA benches in the hospital when you go for the settlement of medical or insurance claim, right? Or for the cashless settlements. So whether the TDS is applicable under 194J on the payments to the hospital, because the services which are rendered by the hospital to the patients are medical services. And therefore, the question arises that the payments which these third-party administrators who are clearing these insurance to the hospitals, whether on that the payments made 194J will be applicable. So the CBDT has clarified that the TPS who make the payment on behalf of the insurance company to the hospitals, I'll just open up the module also for you, for the settlement of the claims are liable to deduct TDS under 194J because the payments are made to the hospital for the medical services provided to the patients, and therefore these are the professional services. Next one is whether transaction charges paid by the members of the stock exchange for availing the online trading facility, which is entirely automated, whether that constitutes the technical service to attract the provisions of 194J. So Supreme Court in Kotak Securities held that these are technical services. These are not technical services because these are entirely automated online facilities, online trading facility. So these are not some specialized services given to the brokers. These are the automated trading facility, which is entirely online. There is no human intervention. There is no specialized service. It's a general services provided to all the brokers. So this is not the technical service. Technical service means what? There has to be some specialized service provided. This is not a specialized service. It's just an automated tool which is developed. So this is not the payment which will qualify as the technical service. Are we clear? Any doubts? Any questions so far? Yes? Fine? Okay. Now there is similar section which is applicable over here, which is section 194M. Let me first take that. So just like you had 194IB for the individuals or HUFs who are not having the turnover more than 1 CR or 50 lakh. Similarly, for 194J, there is an extension under 194M, which is basically covering the individual or HUF who are not having the turnover more than 1 CR or more than 50 lakh. So basically, who are not covered for the contract under 194C, commission under 194H, or the TDS under 194J, who are basically paying for any works contract or for commission or for professional services, will deduct the TDS at the rate of 2% or 5% if before 1/10/24 if the aggregate sum during the financial year exceeds rupees 50 lakh. Again, here there is no requirement to obtain the TAN number. It will be entirely PAN based deduction. So just if you see under 194J also, we have the individual or HUF only when they have the turnover more than 1 CR or 50 lakh. Similarly, if you see under 194H, we had the similar thing. 194C also, we had the similar thing, right? Where the individual has the turnover more than this limit. So we have a new section now under 194M, which is an extension for 194C, H and G, where the deductor will be individual or HUF having turnover less than 1 crore or gross receipts less than 50 lakh. Deductee is resident. TDS is 2% or 5% if before 1/10/24. Timing will be the credit or payment, whichever is earlier. This is rupees 50 lakh. Right? So this is basically covering even the salaried employees who are not into business, same like 194IB, where you were paying rent, where you were a salaried employee, you did not have any business, but you are paying rent more than 50,000 per month, you are required to deduct TDS under 194IB. You are also under 194M. Those individuals or HUF which are not into business but are making these huge payments are required to deduct TDS, and for this purpose, there is no requirement to obtain TAN. Are we clear? Fine. Yes or no? Any questions, any doubts, students, so far?
No doubt, ma'am.
No doubt? Fine. Okay. Now we'll do the rest of the sections. There is this next section 194K, which is applicable for paying to a resident in any income in respect of units of mutual fund, units from the administrator, units from the specified company. Specified company is again basically the unit trust only. So this section is applicable when there is income which is being paid in respect of the units, right? So in that respect, the TDS is given as 10%. And again at the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. And the TDS is not required if the income does not exceed rupees 5,000 or the income is in the nature of the capital gain. So if you see, they have clearly written over here that where the income does not exceed 5,000 or is in the nature of capital gains. So basically this is on the dividends from the units. So you can just write here 194K income from units other than the capital gain. So these are simple sections. So I'm just writing the TDS amount only. I'm not getting much into again deductee. So the TDS is 10% if income greater than rupees 5,000. Fine. Next section is 194L. Okay, this is omitted. Sorry, my bad. 194LA. This is payment of compensation on acquisition of the immovable property by way of compulsory acquisition. Do you remember we have already done this? This is taxable under which section under capital gain? Yes. 45(5), right? Any compensation on the compulsory acquisition of land or the enhanced compensation, right, is taxable under the capital gain. So on that, there is this TDS of 10% if the compulsory acquisition is of the immovable property other than the agricultural land, right? Because compulsory acquisition of agricultural land is any which ways exempt. So if you remember, I had told you at that point itself that there is this TDS under 194LA if the compensation exceeds rupees 2.5 lakh. Are we clear? So let me take you back to this. See, if you see here, we have clearly written here that there is this TDS under 194LA. See, we have already done wherever the TDS provisions were required to be done so that you don't have to look them separately. Clear? Let's move to the next section. Next is 194LB, where any income by way of interest is payable to a non-resident or to a foreign company in case of the infrastructure debt fund. The person responsible shall deduct the TDS at the rate of 5%. So again, this is a very simple section. If there is an interest payable to a non-resident or to a foreign company by an infrastructure debt fund, there will be straight away TDS of 5%. Fine. Then 194LBA is income from the units of the business trust. These sections, again, we have already covered, students, in which particular chapter? Yes, we have already covered this. In which chapter we have covered? Yes or no? Which chapter we have covered this?
Ma'am, in charitable trust related.
Yes, for the REITs. So for the REITs, 194LBA, 194LBB, we have already covered. 194LBC, all of these provisions we have already covered. If you see, this 194LBA is nothing but the income which is payable by the business trust to the unit holder where it is required to deduct the TDS, right? So these sections we have already covered at the relevant places. Again, 194 LBC is for the securitization trust. 194 LBB is for the AIF. These sections we have already covered here in detail in those particular lectures. Are we clear? Yes or no? So if you just want, I can just, make a look to you if you want to see it where we have covered, so that you can, write in your notes in the taxation of the trust. If you see here, yes. So if you see, we have covered these TDS provision, TDS under 194 LBB, if you can see on the screen, which is for the AIF. Then for the REITs, we have again covered here, there's this TDS provision with respect to all of this, that when it pays to the unit holders also, there is this TDS requirement, which is getting applicable over here, income taxable in the hands of unit holders. So again, if you see these TDS related points, we have already covered here. So all of that under 194 LBA. Then if you see for the securitization trust also, I think securitization trust we had covered at the start. Yeah, so even that we have covered. So all the TDS provisions we have covered with respect to that. So I'm not spending any time on that. Then directly we are 194N we have already done. Now moving to 194N, which is the payment of certain amount in cash. So in order to curb the cash transactions, they have introduced the TDS on the cash amount, cash withdrawal amount. So what it says is that every person who is a banking company, cooperative society, which is a cooperative bank, a post office, when it is paying the cash, right, over ₹1 crore to any person from one or more accounts maintained by the account holder with that bank, shall at the time of payment of such sum deduct the amount equal to 2% of the sum. So on the cash withdrawal, the TDS will be 2%. The timing of the deduction will be what? At the time of withdrawal of the amount. Are we clear? So this limit which is given is how much? 1 crore. Over ₹1 crore. In case it's a cooperative society. So if you see here, it says, provided that the fourth proviso, if you see, 1 second. It says where the recipient is a cooperative society, the provisions of this section shall have effect as for the 1 crore, 3 crores. So basically what they are trying to say is that in case if it's a cooperative society, you can withdraw up to 3 crores, there will be no TDS. But for bank and post office, the limit of withdrawal is 1 crore. Over ₹1 crore, the TDS will be deducted. Are we clear? Nothing contained in this section shall apply to the payment made to the government if the withdrawal is by the government, by another bank, by another cooperative bank, or by a post office, or by ATM. In that case, the TDS will not be applicable. Clear? What additionally it says is, in case of a recipient, in case of the account holder who has not filed the return of income for all of the 3 assessment years relevant to the 3 previous year, for which the time limit of filing the return has expired, immediately preceding the year in which the payment of the sum is being made to him, then the sum shall be the amount in cash exceeding ₹20 lakh, and the deduction shall be the amount equal to 2% of the sum, where the payment in cash is exceeding 20 lakh but does not exceed 1 crore, and 5% where the amount exceeds the 1 crore. Now, what does it mean? Let us try and understand this. So, what it is trying to say is, in respect of this particular section, what they are trying to say is that the TDS will be what? Let me just write it over here. $194M, right? Sorry, $194N. This is TDS on cash withdrawal. So you have to ask a question whether the account holder has filed income tax return for all the 3 previous years, relevant or prior to the previous year of withdrawal. If the answer is yes, and mind you saying for all the 3 previous years, let's say we are withdrawing in the previous year 24, 25. Right? So I have to look back for previous year 23, 24, previous year 22, 23, and previous year 21, 22. Whether I have filed the ITR for all the 3 years? Yes, yes, yes. Which means it's a yes. Then, if the cash withdrawal is from bank or post office. Sorry, if the cash withdrawal is from bank or post office, then if it is more than rupees 1 crore, TDS is 2%. If it is from a cooperative bank, if it is more than rupees 3 crore, then TDS is 2%. Are we clear? So this is the limit of the cash withdrawal. If this answer would have been no, meaning in one of the year I have not filed, then this answer becomes the no, right? So in that case, what they say is, they say that the amount will be 20 lakh, right? So whether the cash withdrawal, if it is, sorry, rupees 20 lakh, then what is the TDS rate they are saying? TDS will be 2% and less than rupees 1 crore. And cash withdrawal greater than rupees 1 crore, then they are saying TDS of how much? 5%. Is this chart clear to all of you? Yes or no? Clear? Fine to everyone? Okay, yes or no? Any doubt, any question with respect to this? Okay, now this is not
Ma'am?
applicable to the,
मैम
yes,
if in a case या बैंक में लिमिट दी हुई है 1 करोड़ की, more than 1 करोड़, right? if मैम फर्स्ट पेमेंट पे तो हमें पता नहीं चलेगा कि उसने कितना किया है, तो जो भी पेमेंट 1 करोड़ से अबव हो जाएगी उस पे हम लोग फिर 1 करोड़ पे करेंगे या अबव उस पे टीडीएस काटेंगे?
पूरे पे करेंगे, पूरे पे। जो अभी फिर उसके बाद आप जो विड्रॉ कर रहे हो उसमें से वो अमाउंट डिडक्ट होके आपको खाली मिलेगा विड्रॉल अमाउंट।
ओके मैम,
फाइन,
यस मैम, क्लियर।
एनी अदर क्वेश्चन? Okay, fine. Chalo. So next we move on to what, let me take one question on this. If you see here in your module, let me see if we can take this question. So these are the straightforward questions only, I think. Yeah, I think these are straightforward questions. So you can just do this example which is given over here so that you understand all of these, basically that how these limits are applicable. Fine. So now coming to the next section, let's move on. 194O. So 194O is payment of certain sums by the e-commerce operator to the e-commerce participant. So has this particular section been done in case of this chapter that you have done on the taxation of digital transaction? Yes. Has this section been taken already? Yes or no? Or at least tell me, has it been taken? Yes or no, students? This particular chapter you had, right? Taxation of digital transactions recently. Has it been taken with you? Yes or no, at least just inform me that, because then I have to spend time accordingly on this particular section.
Ma'am, please you explain it.
Yeah, I will explain it for sure, but whether it has been taken? Yes. Taxation of digital transaction में कौन से sections करवाए थे? Nobody's answering. I don't think it's taken. Okay. So 194O is basically notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in provisions of Part B, where sale of goods or provision of services of an e-commerce participant is facilitated by e-commerce operator through the digital or electronic facility or platform, such e-commerce operator shall deduct the tax at the rate of 0.1%. Now this 0.1% has been again changed with effect from 1/10/2024. Prior to this, it was 1%. So basically, see what happens is, student, for example, Amazon, right? अब आप अगर कुछ सेल करना चाहो Amazon पे, can you do it? Answer is yes, we can all do it. So therefore, the Amazon becomes this e-commerce operator, right? The Amazon is basically the e-commerce operator, right? Amazon क्या कर रहा है कि Amazon मुझे goods या services उस पे कुछ list करने दे रहा है. If you want to write a book, let's say I'm writing a book on income tax, I can put it on Kindle, right? And therefore, the Amazon will be the e-commerce operator, because if you see the definition of the e-commerce operator in the explanation, it says e-commerce operator means a person who owns, operates, or manages digital or electronic facility or platform for the electronic commerce. Who is an e-commerce participant? E-commerce participant means a person resident in India who is selling the goods or services, including the digital products, through this digital or electronic facility or platform. So basically what is happening, students, is in respect of 194O, let's say me, right, selling, or let's say providing the income tax book on Amazon Kindle, right? And you are my students, right, who will be reading it. So I am a resident, I become the e-commerce participant. Here only resident can be covered, not a non-resident. Correct? Non-resident के लिए equalization levy हुआ करता था, जो अब नहीं है. Right? This becomes e-com operator. So what this section is trying to say, that where the sale of goods or provision of services of an e-commerce participant is facilitated by an e-commerce operator, right? So this is the facilitation, right? So in that case, the e-commerce operator shall at the time of credit of the amount of sale or services or both to the account of e-commerce participant, or at the time of payment to the e-commerce participant by any mode, whichever is earlier, deduct the tax at the rate of 0.1% of the gross amount of sale or services. So basically, let's say my book is rupees 1,000, right? So you will pay, when you buy the book, you will pay to Amazon Kindle rupees 1,000, right? Amazon Kindle will retain certain commission, let's say rupees 200, and will pay me back, let's say rupees 800. So this e-commerce operator has to deduct the TDS at the rate of 0.1% or 1% before 1/10/24 at not 200, not 800, at rupees 1,000. On rupees 1,000. Because this is the gross amount. So on this gross amount, the e-commerce operator will deduct this particular amount. However, no deduction shall be made for any sum credited or paid to the account of e-commerce participant being an individual or HF where the gross amount of the sale or services during the year does not exceed 5 lakh and he has furnished the PAN. Okay. So therefore, what they are trying to say is that in case for the individual or HUF, the threshold is rupees 5 lakh, below which there will not be any TDS. Is this particular part clear to you, students? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Now tell me, was it done or is it not done? At least just, let me know, because then I have to proceed accordingly. ये करवाया हुआ है सेक्शन आपको? Yes or no, students? At least tell me that. याद ही नहीं है, कुछ तो बोलो.
आई थिंक मैंने वो लेक्चर नहीं लिया होगा जिसमें ये बताया था, मे बी.
Okay. Fine, no problem. So now whether this is applicable in the case of the non-resident e-commerce operator, the answer is yes. This is also applicable in the case of the non-resident e-commerce operator also. Because only the e-commerce participant should be a resident. The e-commerce operator can be a non-resident. Are we clear? Yes. So let's move to the next section then.
मैम ई-कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर अगर नॉन रेजिडेंट है तो उसे फिर टीडीएस काटने पे 10 लेना पड़ेगा.
Yes. उसे TDS काटने में 10 लेना पड़ेगा. Correct. Next is section 194P, which is deduction of tax in case of specified senior citizen, which says in case of specified senior citizen, who is a specified senior citizen who is of 75 years or more, which is an individual who is a resident of India. So this 194P TDS is only for individual who is a resident of India, who is more than 75 years of age at any time, who is having the income in the nature of pension and no other income except the income of the interest with the bank and has furnished the declaration to the bank. Now, in that case, the bank will deduct the TDS after allowing the Chapter 6A deduction and after giving him the rebate under 87A. will compute the total income of that particular specified senior citizen and deduct the income tax at the rates in force. So this is basically a section which is introduced to help the senior citizen so that they don't have to, file the income tax returns and, claim the deduction. So claim the particular TDS. So what the bank will do is the bank on their behalf will compute their total income. The bank will take the declaration from them that they don't have any other income except the interest from the deposits in the bank and the pension. They should not have any other income. If they have any other income, obviously the bank cannot help. The bank will not be able to deduct the TDS on the other incomes. But the bank knows that, okay, this is the interest which is there and the pension which is there. Then in that particular case, by giving them the deduction under Chapter 6A and allowing them the rebate, the bank will be calculating the TDS on that at the rates in force. And the declaration have to be given by these individuals who are more than 75 years age in the Form 12 BBA. So based on that declaration, the bank will compute the total income and will calculate the TDS. Are we clear? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, which regime will the bank opt for? So that depends on whether the individual exercises the option to shift out of 115 BAC. So 194P says rates in force. Now rate in force will be dependent on whether the individual has opted out of 115 BAC. Then of course on that, whether deductee has not exercised the option to opt out of 115 BAC, then it will go under the 115 BAC. Are we clear? So that depends on what is the individual's preference. Clear? Any questions? Any doubt? Fine.
Clear, ma'am.
Okay, next. So next particular is 194Q, which is deduction of tax at source on the payment of the certain sums for purchase of goods. So now this particular section under 194Q is for the purchase of the goods. Now what does this section say? It requires the buyer who is paying the purchase price to the seller, who is a resident seller, right? For the purchase of goods which are exceeding rupees 50 lakh, he has to deduct the tax at the 0.1% of the amount which is in excess of 50 lakh. And this has to be at the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier. So basically, buyer means here what? Buyer means a person whose total sales or turnover exceeds rupees 10 crore in the last financial year. Are we getting it? So the buyer means a person whose sales exceed the 10 crore in the last year, not this year. And he has to deduct the TDS under 194Q if the purchases are more than 50 lakhs. And on the sum which is more than 50 lakh, let's say my sale is 51, purchase is 51 lakhs, so on 1 lakh I have to deduct the TDS at 0.1%. Can the buyer here be a non-resident? Answer is no. The buyer here cannot be a non-resident. Both the buyer and the seller would be the resident. Are we clear? Yes or no?
Ma'am,
So just write
any
here.
goods.
Yes, any goods. So if you see here, it says the goods are not defined. It can be any goods. So 194Q TDS on the purchases. Buyer, turnover of last previous year. Let's say for this year it will be 24-25. Previous year के लिए turnover of 23-24 should be greater than rupees 10 crore. Okay, this is previous year. He is purchasing so goods valued greater than rupees 50 lakh. So on the consideration in excess of 50 lakh, there will be TDS at the rate of 0.1%. Both of them should be resident. Are we clear? This is 194Q. There is another provision which is also applicable over here. TCS. If you see here, they are talking about 206C1H. This is TCS. Now, TCS is what? TCS is tax collected at source. What it says is, every person being a seller who receives any amount as consideration for sale of goods over rupees 50 lakh in the previous year, other than the goods which are exported out of India, shall at the time of receipt of such amount collect the TCS at the rate of 0.1% of the sale consideration exceeding rupees 50 lakh. And here the seller again means what? Whose turnover exceeds rupees 10 crore in the previous financial year. So, let me just remove this. Seller turnover of the last previous year for 24-25 again will be 23-24 previous year greater than rupees 10 crore. Rest of the conditions remain the same. That sale of goods greater than rupees 50 lakh. So he has to collect TCS at the rate of 0.1% on the sale consideration greater than rupees 50 lakh. Now you will ask, ma'am, there also, ye kya jhole? There is this TDS also applicable, there is this TCS also applicable.
Yes, madam.
So what do we do in this case? क्या किया जाए? Yes. So whether the same consideration will be applicable with respect to the TDS also?
No, ma'am,
Yes.
because both are advanced taxes.
तो दोनों ही लग रहे. So with respect to that, where the sale of goods is more than 50 lakh, there is obligation on the both buyer as well as the seller to deduct the TDS as well as TCS. But if we put both to TDS and TCS, there will be problem. So first responsibility is to collect the TCS under 206C1H. So the CBDT has clarified that, on a particular transaction, you will first see that if the tax has been deducted by the buyer. So 206C1H provides the exemption from TCS if the buyer has deducted the transaction and then the seller need not collect TCS. Then automatically TCS will not become applicable. However, if for any reason, before the buyer could deduct the TDS, this will do what? The first thing would be the buyer should deduct the TDS. Collection. Are you getting this?
Yes, ma'am.
TDS में क्या होगा? मैं 100 में से 10 रुपए माइनस करके दूंगी. TCS में मैं क्या करूंगी? 100 प्लस 10 रुपए लूंगी.
Yes, ma'am.
Clear? So the buyer has to furnish the declaration to the seller. Are we clear?
मैम क्या ये डिक्लेरेशन यानी ओरल होगा या फिर रिटर्न में
No,
देना
no,
होगा?
written declaration. They have to give a written declaration.
Okay, ma'am.
Clear? Let's move on to then the next section. 194R. This you would have already done 194R again when you would be dealing 28.4 perquisite under business, right? Now you have cash perquisites also covered under 28.4. So again on that amount, there will be TDS under 194R, right? So if the perquisites are given to the business, then in that case, this perquisite is taxable under 28.4, isn't it? This would have been already done with you under 28.4 itself, right? So in that case, the TDS will be applicable on the payment of the perquisite amount. The perquisite amount may be in cash, may be in kind, but the TDS will become applicable at the rate of 10%. So I'm not again getting more into this because this would, I assume, have already been done in your PGBP class where you have already learned about the perquisite taxation in detail. Clear? So let's move on to the next section then. 194S, payment on transfer of virtual digital asset. Again, I suppose this is covered as a part of your digital class which was there under 194S. Yes or no? Is this covered or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct? So again, we are just touching upon that 194S which is there. There is this TDS on the virtual digital asset which is again 1%. So I'm not getting more into these sections because these are already covered. 194T would also have been already covered with respect to the payment of the payment to the partners of home. I think I have only covered, right, when we were doing the partnership accounts, right, with respect to taxation of the partnership, where I told you that now when you pay the remuneration or salary to the partners, it will be the partnership has to deduct the TDS at the rate of 10%. We have covered this or not? Don't tell me you don't remember.
Yes.
We have covered, right? Yes. So again, when the partnership firm pays, we have seen what are the remuneration and interest obligation. Yes, I was just checking and was reminding you that at least I have covered. I'm not sure about the other lecture, but yes, I have covered it. Fine. So again,
Ma'am,
we are not getting into this.
excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
The point related to ECO, now I get it. Actually, सर ने करवाया था, उन्होंने एग्जांपल दिया था नेटफ्लिक्स से रिलेटेड.
Yeah. So there are many examples.
Yes.
Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, whatever you call. So there are many examples which you can take with respect to that.
Actually, when you have asked ना एकदम से दिमाग से
No, that's fine. So it's done.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the rest of the sections which are there, we'll just quickly finish it off from the module itself, which are, very procedural in nature, which is one is certificate for deduction of tax at lower rate. अब क्या होता है, ये सारे sections जो यहाँ पे दिए हुए हैं 192, 193 जो भी सारे sections दिए हुए हैं, यहाँ पर तो tax rate is specified that it's 10%, 5%, 2%, whatever tax rate is there.
Yes, ma'am.
Quite possible that my income may not be actually crossing 250,000, 300,000, whatever the slab rates are there now, right? So it is quite possible I may have below taxable income, but then you are deducting my TDS and then blocking my funds because I will have to then claim the refund in the month of July when I file my income tax return. Or even in the case of a company, I may be a loss-making company, but you are deducting my TDS, so I will have to wait until October to file my income tax return and claim refund. So that results in the blockage of my working capital. Correct? If I have to sell a property, there is TDS under 194IA. If I am paying it on then, 194IA is not covered under 197. If you see 194IA is not covered. But if you are paying me rent, but my income is not crossing 250. Suppose मेरी एक ऑफिस है, मैंने 8,000 के रेंट पे दी हुई है. So it's not crossing even 250 and that's my only income. So I will request to my payer to not deduct the TDS. But he will not listen, obviously, because अगर वो नहीं डिडक्ट करेगा तो क्या हो जाएगा, He will be treated as assessee in default. The expenditure will be disallowed. The interest will be payable by him. There will be penalties. There will be prosecution, all against him. So obviously, why he will listen to me? I'm not going to, protect him. So in that case, I will have to make an application to the AO, to my AO, that look, please AO, my income is not crossing the particular slab rate, or my income is not taxable during the year. These are the proof. These are my bank statements. This is the computation of my income. You please decide and let me know what should be my taxable income, or what, sorry, not what should be my taxable income, what should be my TDS obligation. Do I really have a TDS obligation? Do I really have to pay the TDS at 2% under 194C? Or 10% under 194R? If my income is not crossing, if my income is well below that, you decide and give me the rate. That whether it should be 2%, 3%, 4%, depend. Let's say I'm going under rent. I have income under rent and I don't feel that 10% is the justifiable rate, because my income tax is actually effective income tax, meaning the total tax divided by my total income is maybe 3%. So I will request to AO to please give the certificate to my payer that 3% is what he should deduct under 194I and not 10%, because that will otherwise become difficulty for me. That will block my funds. So if the AO is satisfied, he will give the lower deduction or no deduction certificate. He can give a nil deduction certificate also if there is no income, if he is satisfied, or he can give a lower deduction certificate to the payer, and based on that certificate, the payer will deduct the TDS at a lower rate. Clear? So that can only be possible through the AO. Clear? Similar is the provision. Sorry, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
अगर किसी की इनकम 1 करोड़ से भी एक्सीड हो रही है, तब भी क्या, और वो प्रॉपर्टी सेल कर रहा है, तब भी क्या वो लोअर टीडीएस के लिए अप्लाई कर सकता है?
प्रॉपर्टी सेल का यहाँ कवर्ड नहीं है. If you see 194IA is not covered over here. If you are a non-resident, then of course you can get under 195, because only a resident is covered under 194IA, resident seller, resident buyer. If you are a non-resident seller, then of course 195 will apply, and then of course you can come under 197. Clear? Next is no deduction in certain cases, 197A. This is again, so any individual who is a resident in India and has the estimated total income less than the basic exemption limit and wants to receive the dividend or any sum out of national savings scheme without the TDS, then again he has to furnish the declaration in this prescribed manner. So again, this is the similar thing. Then, yeah. Then what they are saying is that the tax which is being deducted is nothing but is my income only. So let's say 100 rupees is my income. Out of that, 10 is my TDS. So, taxpayers are very smart. What they were saying is that no, only 90 is what we will show in the gross total income. That is wrong. That 10 rupees, which is also deducted, is your income. You show 100 as your income and then claim 10 as your TDS. So 10 will be given to you as a credit. Don't show 90 as your income and then claim 10 as a credit. That is wrong approach. So that's what 198 says. Then with respect to the TDS duty of the person deducting the tax, as I said, the deductor has to deduct the TDS. He has to then make the submission of the returns of the TDS to the income tax department against each and every PAN of the payee, that this is what is the TDS deducted from them. So there is time limit for furnishing the statements with respect to the TDS or TCS returns. So you have to give those statements to them, to the income tax department, or by online filing. Are we clear? So that is something one. Now, in case the deductor fails to deduct the TDS, what is the consequence? He will be treated as assessee in default under section 2011, and in that particular case, what will happen is there will be penalty, there will be interest which will be charged to him. So there will be interest liability 1% for every month or part of the month on the amount of which such tax from the date on which it was deductible to the date on which actually deducted. So for the late deduction, 1%. For the late payment after the deduction, it's 1.5%. Fine. And there will also be the penalty and prosecution implication. But the assessee will not be, or deductor will not be treated as assessee in default if the payee has furnished the return of income. He has considered that income on which tax was to be deducted in his return of income and has also discharged the self-assessment tax. Then the payer may not be considered as assessee in default. But the payee has to furnish a CA certificate with respect to that yes, the payee has already considered this income and paid the taxes in his personal return. Are we clear? So that is with respect to the assessee in default, which is there. Then, yeah, they have to give the certificate of the TDS to the payee. I think that's it. Yeah, and then this already I explained that there has to be a TAN number which is to be obtained. Yeah, now one more last point with respect to this is that in case the payee does not have a PAN, if the payee does not have a PAN, then in that particular case, there will be 206AA section getting applicable. Now, what is 206AA? 206AA says that if the payee does not furnishes the PAN, then the TDS will be at a higher rate. What will be the higher rate? Higher of the TDS rate or 20%. In the case of 194O or 194Q, the highest rate will be 5%, not 20%. And in the case of 194IM, I told you, right, where there was a rental payment to an individual or HUF who is not having the turnover more than 1 CR or 50 lakh. We just now discussed here that in case 206A is becoming applicable, in that case, the TDS amount shall be restricted to the maximum of the rent per month. It will not exceed beyond that. Are we clear? So 206AA says that the rate will be at the higher rate. If you do not furnish PAN, then instead of the, let's say, 10% rate and the 194J, it will be 20%. Are we clear? Any questions so far? Any doubt? Yes, any questions? Fine.
Yes,
Then
ma'am.
there is one more similar section like this. If the payee is a non-filer of income tax return, if the payee has not filed the income tax return for the previous year, immediately preceding the year in which the tax is required to be deducted, and the time limit of 139(1) has expired, and the TDS and TCS in his case are more than 50,000 during that year, then in that particular case, the TDS will be deducted at twice the rate which is there in the Act or at the rate of 5%, whichever is higher. Now, this is not applicable in case the TDS are under these sections. Now, how do you know whether the payee has filed the income tax return or not? For that purpose, the income tax department has enabled a facility. So, the payer has to check within that facility whether the payee is a filer or a non-filer. Are we clear? Yes or no? Any questions? Any doubt? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Last one point before we end is TCS, which is there on the motor vehicle. On the motor vehicle, there's a TCS of 1% on the motor vehicle worth rupees, more than worth rupees 10 lakh. Other than that, we have already covered TCS on the purchase of to do is with respect to the overseas tour program or the foreign remittances. In these overseas package, like I want to go for a Swiss holiday and therefore I'm buying it from a booking.com. Their entire package, which will include basically my stay, my flight, everything over there. So when they will collect the amount from me, they will collect the TCS. Now the TCS is basically, if it is for overseas tour program package, if I'm paying more than 7 lakh, it will be 5%, and beyond 7 lakh, it will be 20%. In case the remittance is going for the purpose of education, if the banks are remitting the amount for the purpose of education or for medical treatment outside India by any person, then there is no TCS up to 7 lakh. And if more than 7 lakh, it is 5%. If the remittances are going out of the loans which are obtained from the Indian financial institution, for which you also claim the deduction under ATE for the interest, again, no TCS up to 7 lakh and 0.5% over and above 7 lakh. And if the remittance is going for any other purpose, let's say I'm sending money outside India to any other person, I will have to pay TCS on 20% if the amount exceeds 7 lakh. If the amount is less than 7 lakh, again, there is no TCS. Clear? So this you will have to remember. Basically, the TCS is an important part, because otherwise, you can easily, score here, but in case you make mistakes, so there could be problem, the entire sum can go wrong or the entire answer can go wrong. So please remember these particular limits. This is very, very important for your examination, because this will fetch you full marks if you write right. So with this, your entire chapter is over with respect to TDS and TCS. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Again, see, for TDS and for TCS also, the same things are applicable. If the collector does not collect the TCS, he will again be treated as assessee in default. He has to furnish the statements. Also, the payer has to, not the payer, sorry, basically the person from whom he is collecting the TCS has to again furnish the PAN. If he doesn't give the PAN, then of course the rate will be not at 20% like the TDS. It will be twice the rate which is given under the Act, or at the rate of 5%, whichever is higher. And again, here also the non-filer thing is similarly applicable, which is if the person is a non-filer for the last year and has the TCS and TDS more than 50,000, then the rate will be twice the rate or 5%, whichever is higher. So same provisions are applicable over here. Any questions that you have, please feel free to ask me.
मैम जो TCS के लिए रिटर्न है वो TDS में ही शो हो जाती है या अलग से फॉर्म रिटर्न होती है?
अलग से रिटर्न जाती है. It's 27 EQ.
ओके मैम.
Yeah. TDS के लिए भी काफी सारे अलग अलग रिटर्न्स होते हैं. It's like 24Q, 26Q. There are so many other returns. For 27Q for a non-resident, there are so many other returns.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. And the last part is the advance tax. I don't think, you need to be told about advance tax. It is applicable if you have income under the PGBP and you are not, sorry, if you are having income more than 10,000 and you are not more than 60 years. In case you are more than 60 years, then of course advance tax does not become applicable to you. Or if you do not have income under PGBP, then also advance tax does not become applicable to you. So you have to discharge again the advance tax also, which is 15 June, 15 September, 15 December, and 15 March, with these installments of 15, 45, 75, and 100% of amount. In case you do not do it, then of course you have the interest, which is applicable under 234B and 234C. 234A is for late filing, 234B and C is for the non-payment of the advance taxes or delayed payment. So 1% is under 234B, and then 234C is again 1% in case you are deferring the advance tax, you're not paying on time. So that is again the interest obligations for the 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, and the last 15 March for 1 month. Fine. Yes. Any questions? Any doubt? Anything you want to ask?
No, ma'am. Clear.
Clear? Okay.
Clear,
So
ma'am.
with this, we will, I think, stop here. In case you have any questions or any doubt, please feel free to send it to the BOS and we shall answer all the questions. So thank you so much. And let's see if we will meet in the next class, because I think you have next few lectures on the appeals and assessments. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
Yes.